Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to the places you'll go. We've had a few episodes. Each one's independent. You can watch it, but I hope you'll catch the other ones. They're all archived on our YouTube channel, on our website, and so on. I'm taking you to places where I take people. I take people to Israel and Italy and other places, and I'm taking you there by way of video. It's great fun. And today, I got to thinking recently about the theme of home. You know, people say, where are you from? Some people don't even know where they're from. We have such a mobile society. You know, people used to speak of their old home place. You know, where's home? There's something in us, we have a hankering for home. I love to visit historic homes. When I travel somewhere, if there's some historic home, I like to go see it. That's always neat. I thought, for this, I'd want to start at one of the homes of Martin Luther King Jr. When he went in 1955 to be the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, he lived in the church's parsonage. And I've been to visit that parsonage. It's a little house. Home tour there, and the room that I like the most is the kitchen. Now, the kitchen this is some fantastic kitchen. They've kept it restored as it would have been back in the 50s when King and Coretta and family lived there. And to me, what is cool about that kitchen is there was a night in January of 1956 where Rosa Parks, a month before, had not got off the bus. The Montgomery bus boycott had started. National press, but there was a lot of harassment from the Ku Klux Klan. And King, every night, was getting one phone call after another, threatening him, threatening his family. A firebomb went off on the porch of their house. And so one night around midnight, he'd got one of those calls and he tried to go back to sleep. He couldn't go back to sleep. So he goes into this kitchen and starts to make a cup of coffee. And he sits at the table. You can see the table. They're in the parsonage, and here's what he reported later. He said he just prayed. He said, Lord, I'm here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I'm afraid. I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face this anymore. Then he said, at that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced God before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, stand up for justice, stand up for truth. I will be at your side forever. He said this voice that he thought he heard promised never to leave me alone, never to leave me alone, no, never alone. At the kitchen table at midnight. I love that. So home. Where did Jesus live? He was born in Bethlehem, but then he grew up in Nazareth. That'd be some archaeological find. If you can find the house where Jesus lived in Nazareth, you can. Nazareth today, when we go to Israel, we go there. It is one big congested city. It's one of the rare places in Israel where, relatively speaking, Jews, Christians, and Muslims live together pretty peaceably. I was actually there one time. And there was one guy, I saw these two guys, they were joking around with each other, laughing, having a big time. I got up closer. One was giving out copies of the Quran, and the other was giving out copies of the Bible. I declined them both, and as I walked away, they were laughing and enjoying each other again. That was pretty interesting. Congested city today, but in the time of Jesus, it was tiny. Artists have rendered what they think it would have looked like. This is so small. They think the population of Nazareth might have been 70, 90. I mean, talk about small towns. Talk about, Joseph and Mary getting betrothed. It's not like you had a lot of people to choose from, right? It's a small pool. How many eligible bachelors were there for Mary? A really small town. What's interesting to me is that Jesus lived most of his life there, in that little tiny town. He wasn't out working miracles. He wasn't traveling. He wasn't having conflict with the Roman authorities. He wasn't walking on the water, any of that. He just lived in Nazareth. His father was a builder, we think carpenter, but a builder, maybe a stonemason also, did all kinds of building. Jesus just worked there with everybody else. He was, they didn't think, well, there's God walking down the street, right? So that's an amazing thing. Sam Wells, used to be the dean of the Duke Chapel. He wrote a book. It's called The Nazareth Manifesto, where he reflects over this fact that Jesus is just there in Nazareth. That's most of his life. He says the most important theological word in the Bible is with. You think it would be the Trinity or redemption or something. He says the most important theological word is with, that God is with us. When Jesus is born, that's his nickname, Emmanuel, God with us. When Jesus leaves, his last words are, I will be with you always. We want God to be, the great fixer, the bubble of protection, the one that guarantees us success in whatever we're trying. But what the Bible really says is that God is with us. God's with us at home. God's with us wherever we are. We maybe don't discover home until we realize that we're at home with God. I think about the great biographer Robert Caro. I love him. He's famous for his multi-volume biography of Lyndon Johnson, among other things. And when he started writing about Johnson, Johnson lived in the Texas Hill Country, and Caro wanted to understand that. So what he did is he moved to the Texas Hill Country for more than 3 years. Like he made his home there. And he lived there for a long time, and he talked to the people, and he walked the streets and rode the country roads, and he began then to understand, sort of an analogy of what God does. God comes to be with us. The other thing that Caro did I love is he talked to all kinds of people who remembered Johnson or his parents or whatever, and he had notebooks. He would take notes, and he said very often in the margin of those notes, he would write the letters S-U, S-U. He said, what that means is, shut up. He said he always had the temptation to talk, but if he would talk, they couldn't talk. So he would just be quiet, and he'd wait people out, and finally they'd say what was on their mind and heart. They'd remember something they didn't remember right off the bat. I love that. At home. We read in the Gospels often, it says that Jesus was at home. Now, by the time they're talking about that, he's grown up and he's begun his ministry, and he goes not too far from Nazareth to the east by the Sea of Galilee. There's a village there called Capernaum. We go and visit Capernaum now, and one of the cool things about Capernaum is this remarkable archaeological find from the late 1960s. These Catholic archaeologists were digging there in a neighborhood where the people of Bible times lived at Capernaum, little adjoining small stone houses. And they found over one of the houses, they'd come along 200 or 300 years later and had built this octagonal church over one of those houses. So they went under that octagonal church to the house, small house, one little room, and they found that house, unlike any of the others in that neighborhood, just a couple of decades after Jesus lived, they had plastered the walls and there was Christian graffiti on the walls. That's got to be the house where Jesus lived when he was in Capernaum. It's amazing. Now that house, Christians can mess up anything. After it was dug up, they built a church on top of it, and I call it the Millennium Falcon. It's like it's right out of Star Wars. So never underestimate Christian ability to make something that is precious tacky. It's just the thing that we can do. But we read, especially at the beginning of Mark's Gospel, I just want to read a couple passages to you about Jesus being at home. It's not his home, though, right? It's the home of Simon Peter and his mother-in-law, right? So here we read Mark chapter 1, verse 29. I love this. It says, immediately Jesus left the synagogue. In Mark, Jesus, he's like in a hurry. It always says immediately, like it's urgent. He's doing so. But the other thing that's interesting when we go to Capernaum is this house, it's about 25 steps from the synagogue. Like if you left the synagogue, he pretty immediately would be back at this house. That's immediate. Immediately he entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon, Peter, his mother-in-law lay sick with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. He came, took her by the hand, and lifted her up. The fever left her in that home, and it's the home where Jesus stayed. Mark chapter 2, this is one of my favorite stories in all of the Gospels. It says, when Jesus returned to Capernaum, he'd been out preaching somewhere else. After some days, it was reported that he was at home. So he's in that house. It says many would gather together so there's no longer room for them. Well, that wouldn't be many people. That house, I don't know, you could probably jam 25 people in there. So it gets full in a hurry. There's no longer room for them, not even around the door. He was preaching the word to them, and they came bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. So you picture 4 guys at each corner of this pallet carrying a man he is immobile. He's paralyzed. When they could not get near him because of the crowd, the translations are interesting, right? It says they removed the roof above him. When they found this house, of course, it was like all the other houses there. Stone walls would go up so far, not real high, no high 12-foot ceilings. And then the roof would have been made of sticks and mud as a thatched roof. So these guys climb up on that small roof, and what the Greek verb is they dug through the roof. So they dig a hole in the roof so they can lower this guy. Well, imagine Jesus and the people that are in the room, what's happening to them? Like, dirt and sticks are falling on their head and they're messing up the roof. Imagine the consternation inside the house. And they lower the man. And I love this. In verse 5, it says, when Jesus saw their faith, he healed the man. You're thinking about when Jesus saw his faith, like, do you have enough faith? I'll heal you. No, but he saw the faith of the 4 who brought him. He heals that man. So interesting. Our faith actually can carry other people. We're meant to be part of a community. We support each other. That's a beautiful thing. Jesus did those things when he was at home. You know, in the Old Testament, God promises the people, not that they'll have this great spirituality, God promises them a land, like a place to live, a place to build a home, dirt to till. You can grow crops. There are addresses in the Bible, real places, just like the home where you live, real places. Even some of the most spiritual things we think about. I did a funeral recently, and I was reading that passage that comes up at a lot of funerals in John chapter 14. Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions, rooms, however it's translated. I go to prepare a place for you. It was only in that funeral that I realized Jesus, he was a builder. He was a house builder when he says, I go to prepare this place for you, this house that has many rooms. Isn't that interesting? He was a home builder. There's a lot in the Bible about homesickness. You could think about your own homesickness. You know, there's some craving that we all have for home, and how do we get there? One of our, I wrote a book about our hymns and certain phrases, and it's called Unrevealed Until It's Season. And I wrote a whole chapter in there on, we sing How Great Thou Art. My favorite line probably is when Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and what? And take me home. Where's this home, right? Is it the home of your memory, home, heaven with God? What joy shall fill my heart? Earlier today, before recording this, I was at lunch, and somehow we got talking about Dolly Parton and just how amazing Dolly Parton is as a singer, writer, person. She built this theme park in Tennessee, Dollywood, and in it she created a replica of her home place. This little house. It's not the real one. It's a replica of it, and thousands of people go there. Dolly Parton on this podcast called Dolly Parton's America, which may be my favorite podcast of all time. It's absolutely fabulous. She calls home the golden thread that keeps me tied to eternity. So she has her song, My Tennessee Mountain Home, and then they have that replica there. And what's amazing to me, you think that would really appeal to people from Appalachia, from Tennessee people, Kentucky people, North Carolina people, maybe Georgia people, whatever. Turns out that house is very popular, and her song is very popular with people from, like the United Kingdom, Lebanon, Kenya, Asia, Japan. What is that about? That people in all these very different cultures, they think about Dolly Parton's country song and that country house, and it taps into something, and it resonates with them, this desire for home. We're going to spend some time around the Sea of Galilee and homes there. One of the newest, coolest places that we found is Magdala. It's one of the newest towns uncovered there. And you hear Magdala, you probably think of Mary Magdalene, and you should. That was her hometown, Mary Magdalene. She's so interesting, right? Because she always gets, the images that she was a, lady of the night, she was immoral, and then Jesus came along. The Bible never says that. That says more about our dirty minds than it does like anything in the Bible. She was forgiven of many sins. We all are. So that's the thing. And then you have the Da Vinci Code saying, she was Jesus' girlfriend. They have descendants that, live in France and so on. Goodness gracious. So Mary Magdalene, she was from Magdala. I reached out to a couple of friends of mine, Jim and Sue Doolin, who know a lot about Magdala. They belong to our church to talk about it.
So, friends, to me, one of the most spectacular archaeological finds in my lifetime around the Sea of Galilee is the city of Magdala. Years ago, we knew something was there, but nobody had dug it up. And so they began excavating. Before it was open to tourists, I got permission to go in there, and I've been intrigued with this place ever since. Then, lo and behold, I've got a couple in my church, Jim and Sue Doolin. And you guys, you not only have been there, you've been involved there in the development and everything. So that's absolutely amazing. The first thing I want to ask you is what to you is captivating about Magdala? Why has this captured your heart and your passion? What is it about Magdala?
Well, I'll go first. So Jim and I happened upon Magdala during basically kind of a private tour of Israel. We had a private guide. He was just zooming us around Israel, and he pulls into this gravel parking lot, and we were like, up until that point, we really hadn't seen a lot of Christian, or we weren't really moved spiritually, and we were kind of disappointed. He was a wonderful guide. He was Jewish, and he loved his homeland, but he wasn't Christian, and he was just kind of showing us the sights. So when he pulls into Magdala, and he's a really funny guy, but he goes, "Okay, guys, I know you've been wanting to meet your Jesus. So this is the one place in Israel where you're going to meet your Jesus." Well, now he had our attention, right? So we crossed this gravel parking lot to this archaeological dig in a half-built hotel, and we're thinking, where are we? And then it's Magdala, and you're just overtaken with the archaeology that you just know Jesus walked through that town.
They started digging, and they found a synagogue. They have found two now, and then they found this stone base, and they think it was what would hold the Torah scroll. And you don't have to use your imagination very much to realize that Jesus came to that synagogue. He taught in that synagogue. Mary Magdalene, among other people, was there. It's a beautiful place also right there by the sea. Jim, what caught your attention about Magdala?
Well, I think we first went in 2016. As Sue said, it was newer, kind of a new attraction somewhat. They just dug the synagogue up in 2008. And we were actually able to walk into the synagogue and among the stones in the synagogue, which now they have
go around
the professional surrounding for it, which was needed. But anyway, so we walked in and sat on the stones, and it was just like, wow. And they found coins dated 29 AD in the synagogue. So we were just like, holy cow. So we were just moved. And then we also, I guess we'll get to Father Juan in a minute, but and then we walked down and saw this just incredible, beautiful church that just right on the Sea of Galilee that just took our breath away.
They built
the church in the synagogue, I think.
Yeah, the church at the entrance says Duc in Altum, which is Latin for plunge into the deep. And it's a church that's dedicated to the women of the Bible. I mean, it's a Catholic church, and it's Israel, and this is just unheard of, and it's a spectacular church. The altar looks like a fishing boat and looks out over the water. It's just one of the most stunning places ever. So you met the first time I went there. They said that this special guy wants to show you around. His name is Father Juan Solana, and he and I become friends. And I know you're friends. He's been in your home in Charlotte. How did you make that deeper connection from just seeing Magdala to being part of what's going on there?
So you tell that story better.
This is a great story. Well, there's an instant connection with Father Juan. It was a very slow day at Magdala, which is completely unheard of now. They have sometimes 2,000 visitors a day. And we were like among the only tourists that day in 2016. So here's this handsome priest having his little cappuccino in this makeshift visitor center. And we get introduced to him and he tells us the whole story of Magdala. And we're captivated. And we go home and we decide we wanted correspondence with this man, and Jim and him become pen pals. Next thing you know, he says, I'm coming to the States. And we said, well, we have a room ready for you. And we showed him around Charlotte. He loved Charlotte. And he discovered Jim was a developer. We took him to a couple of places Jim had done here in Charlotte. And he goes up, and the next morning he comes down, and he literally has tears in his eyes and his rosary in his hands. And he says, Jim Doolin, would you consider helping us develop a visitor center at Magdala? And Jim and I both started crying. It was an amazing moment. And Jim's starting to cry now. Just talking about it still brings emotion. And then from there, we've been back to Israel 4 more times after that initial visit. We are not just Magdala enthusiasts; we're family. They embrace us as one of their own, and they do that to everyone who goes there. We just came back in November, and our group was just captivated by the loving welcome you get there.
Juan Solana he's just one of the most charming, charismatic, holy, spiritual people. I had him on my Bible study. People can Google that. I had a great conversation with him. He has a remarkable story, a personal story related to his mother-in-law of what led him to this place. It was absolutely amazing. So, Jim, tell us about, a lot of the places in Israel have kind of small scale, kind of dumpy visitor centers that you tromp through. But the visitor center there at Magdala is really fitting the place. Tell us about that.
Well,
and the guest house there.
Yeah. So when he asked me to do the visitor center, I said, well, I've never done a visitor center. He said, you're a smart guy, you figure it out. So we got started. The biggest challenge was not just designing a nice building that would fit on the front there, because there are plenty of examples of nice visitor centers and whatever. The particular challenge of this one is that they're projected to have 1 million visitors a year, and not evenly divided by 365. So you have 50, 60 buses at a time coming into the site. You've got to have them empty into the visitor center. You've got to get them through a short film, then out to the ruins and the church and get them back in through the gift shop and back out. And the guides usually give you an hour, which is really not enough for Magdala, but it's kind of what you have to be able to do. And so, so the real challenge was just the math of how to make that work, as well as doing a building design that fit the setting.
And not to track, I think about a place like Rosslyn Chapel outside Edinburgh, where the Da Vinci Code is filmed there. The visitor center overwhelms the chapel.
Right.
It ruins your view of the chapel. But at Magdala, it really just flows really very nicely.
Well, and the whole idea was, don't overwhelm the site. Let's try to have it be nice and fit with the hotel and the rest of it, but have the real story is the ruins, and the village
and the church, and the guest house. The idea is to have retreats over time, and it's just a great thing. And let me ask you in closing. I take people to Israel, and no one has ever come home and said, I don't know why I went to Israel. I didn't like that at all. They all come back and say, that was transformative. That changed my life. What is it about being there that is magical? You've read about Bible stuff. What about being there? What is it? What does that do?
I could just say that being in Magdala, you don't go to Magdala, you experience Magdala. So you're at once taken over by the archaeology. And then there's the Sea of Galilee. And then behind you is Mount Arbel, which you can just picture Jesus possibly climbing up and looking out over the Sea of Galilee. And then Magdala, the family of Magdala, offers experiences such as hiking up. There's a picture of me out on they take paddleboarding tours. I mean, imagine paddleboarding on the Galilee. I was just out there. It was like I was in heaven. And then the people are just so welcoming. I would pray that everyone who goes to Magdala would try to stay at the guest house. And then just one real quick thing about the visitor center. We have it all planned. So to welcome is to be a welcoming place. But we have to raise money to build it. It hasn't been built yet. So that's our our prayer and our hope.
I think for me, James, it's as much I love going to Jerusalem and visiting the old city, but Jerusalem is a little frustrating to me because everything's built on top of something else, on top of something else, on top of something else. And while it's wonderful, the difference is for me is up at Magdala, it's just peaceful, and the ruins are right there on the ground, and it's just a place that it's a nice home base to go out and see all of the other sites around the Galilee, and come back home to the hotel and the place. So.
And then you can stand on the shore at Magdala and you can see Capernaum. You can see any number of the other cities of the Bible. They took the boats back all the time. It says he went to the other side. That's right over there. You can see it. It's an absolutely fabulous thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for sharing with us, and also for investing yourselves in this biblical place. It's going to be a real blessing for hundreds of thousands of people over many years. It's just a great thing. Thank you so much for being a part of that.
Sure. Our pleasure.